Yeah, the link's on the homepage of Canvas. I mean, unfortunately, like most school stuff is online now. Not just my, I mean, clearly my class, but other classes. So being able to manage all of your logins is a big part of, education these days.
Can't find the link for Slack on the course page.
I think it's the Slack icon.
This link is no longer active. I found it, but now it says the link is no longer active.
Did you click here?
Yeah, I clicked it. It says link is no longer active for me. To join this workspace, you'll need to ask the person who originally invited you for a new link.
Everybody else, check that. Works fine. Just did it.
May work fine for you, but
On the homepage of Canvas, click the Slack link.
Okay, I heard about this USB yesterday, and like, I got everything on here.
Okay.
Breakouts.
Dan, does it work for you if you click on this?
works for me.
Okay.
For me.
There's some reason, like, there's also, that's a
Yeah,
project.
it doesn't work for me.
All right, we'll drill down on it later. Did you put Slack on your phone?
No, I don't use Slack on my phone.
It might be a good idea. Brecken, you can use the same one. What I'd like you to do is when you export the textures from Substance Painter for your vase, you should, instead of exporting using the Redshift presets, export using the Unity URP presets. And that will give you the textures you need to plug in to the Unity material so that you get all of the work you did in Substance Painter to appear on your vase.
So
Let's turn that off. Okay, we need to add labels to our catalog. We need to make one really good one here, and then we can use that as a template so that making the subsequent labels for all of our items, right? What do we end up with, like 14 or 15 items we're going to have on the shelf? We can then essentially copy and paste most of the label and just update the text for each individual label on here. Now, I did select one of the fonts. Let's talk about typography again. So this will be a little bit of repeat for those of you who've completed 184, but it's always good to hear this again. Here, I've linked to our most important typography information. One, students a lot of times want to do something quirky or interesting with the font selection, and I can't discourage you enough from doing that. Let your image makers, let your images do the talking here, and try to make the typography design solid and undistracting. And as such, in the past, we used to provide a list of blacklisted fonts, meaning like stuff that would not that you weren't allowed to use. But now I just give everybody the zip file with all of our DMA fonts right here. And you can install them all at once on Windows or Mac, I think. And this is going to help avoid any sort of poor typography decisions. We're going to use one font for this one. You can choose from the provided list, but you'll need to install them first. Actually, for this, well, you should install them so that you have them on all of the other software you have on your computer. But like we said, we don't install the fonts on Unity. You drag in the font file, and then you have to create a TextMesh Pro font asset. And I'm using Arvo. And so in our case, I'm going to grab Arvo Italic, because I want to have a slightly different, actually I'm going to grab bold and italic, because I want to create some hierarchy in our label. And so I'm going to use bold for the actual name of the product. I'm going to use regular for the description, and then italic for the price. So let's bring in bold and make the font asset. So let's create TextMesh Pro, font asset, and then italic create TextMesh Pro font asset. Cool. So we've got all those ready to go now. Do not, all of this is going to be on screen at the same time. We don't have a crazy amount of, these descriptions should be short, a sentence or two. Do not choose from different fonts, right? Choose one and then choose different weights within that font for the description and title. This project is not big enough to warrant multiple typefaces. The attitude we have towards typography is summed up really well in this video. I would watch this, take notes on it, and try to memorize and internalize these 10 essential rules of using typography. This is a really interesting video. The video is based on a PDF. The PDF is produced by a it's a YouTube channel called Future, Futur, focused on design and the business of design, by a gentleman. Chris Do is the designer. He runs a wildly successful design agency called Blind, and has a lot of design educational content out there. And the manual goes over some just general rules and guides about using typography. And then, see, use one typeface, skip await, double the point size, we'll do that here, and align to one axis. Yes, far too often students center type. Just looks bad. When you align to an axis, you are creating a grid, and that's what we're after here. We want to have a grid that we are following. In fact, we'll bring in an image to use as the grid. And here's, the typeface information. It says, use any typeface you want, as long as it's one of these, right? So he's kind of making a joke there. You'll notice that these names are different than the names in the zip file, and that's because a lot of these are copyrighted fonts that would need to be purchased, and the ones that I've provided for you in the zip file are the free to use sort of Google font equivalent of them, and in most cases they're very, very similar. The group by using rules will do this. Don't put things up against the edge of the frame. We'll bring in a guide to use there. And once you check out the PDF, there's an animated version of the PDF here, which is really well done. And what I want to draw your attention to here is that, again, the grid applies not only for the layout of the type on the page, but also for the movement, the animation of the type. When we're reinforcing the grid by laying it out, a line left or a line right, we're essentially creating this rectangular grid, and almost always we want to be animating along the lines of that grid, having things going straight up, straight left. So no diagonal movement. The diagonal movement would just seek to visually conflict with the grid that we're creating with the actual alignment of the typography. So we'll try to follow these principles as best we can while laying some of this out here. In fact, the skip await thing may not always be possible. Let's see what Arvo has here. Bold, bold italic, regular. Yeah, so this typeface doesn't have an extra level of bold. Maybe we'll see what it looks like there. Great. All right, let's bring in our guide. It's going to help us do some things. And so here, those of you familiar with After Effects, I have you turn on the title safe area. And so this is essentially the same thing, but we'll need to manually import it. And so we'll save this image as our chart. And in order to make sure it appears correctly, I'm going to make sure that we are at 1920 by 1080 over here, and so that this is correctly aligned. And then in Canvas, I'm going to make a new UI image. There we go. This will be my guide. And let's import that image that I just downloaded in downloads on this drive. Here we are. Bring that in. And our guide. We need to switch this from image to sprite and apply it. Cool. And in our guide here, Now we should be able to import that. And set native size. Boom. Right? That's great. Why did that work? Because the image is 1920 by 1080, and because I set this to 1920 by 1080 before we started. We don't want to be totally covering everything up, and so under color, alpha, I'll just chill this out so that we can see it as a guide now for alignment. And so first things, let's align our button over here. There we go. And so I can move this so that we're aligned with the outside box here. We don't want things to, yeah, I think the outside box is going to be good. It'll give us enough room and give us a little more room in the frame for everything. Cool. All right, so we have our guide. Everything else is there. Let's go ahead and start creating our type template. I'm going to make one more folder in here for shelf animation so that I can have that selected when I make new animations. Yeah, let's go ahead and start laying out one of the descriptions here. And we'll do that with UI and then TextMesh Pro. And this will be one of our things that we bring in here. We'll say that this is the, we'll swap out some of the other stuff. We'll do a little bit of modeling. There's a whole Maxon video to watch on the modeling. It's sort of just building on the techniques we've already used. The other thing I asked you to do is make 3 additional items using the volume mesher workflow that we used thoroughly on the playground. And so let's say this is going to be the large face. And let's go ahead and grab our font here. So in situations like this, where I have a thing selected in the Unity interface, and then I click something here, and then this goes away, but I want to drag it over here, so I click, and then I click, and then I click, and then I click. You can come over here and lock the attributes pane over here, and so that it stays on this object as I select things down here. It's just important to remember that you did that so that you can unlock it so that you can adjust other things. And so in this case, we want to have the bold for our title, and so I'll put that over there. And you've got to expand this way if we want to be able to see it. And I feel like this needs to be bigger. We'll go, let's say, 46 point type on that. And that'll end up being the title. For this one, I'm just going to Control D that, and now bring this down a little bit. And this is going to end up being the description, just something, a placeholder here. This large vase will make an impression centerpiece, 1 word or 2 words? I want to say 2. 1. Good. Great. And like I said, the title was in I typed in the wrong one. There we go. So this is our title. I'm going to start labeling this. This, let's unlock. There we go. Is going to be our description. There we go. And we used 46-point type on top, and so let's use that typography rule about doubling point size. So we'll make this 23. I was going to use 45, but then I changed it to 46 to make my math easier. And because can you put a? I don't think you can put a point. Can you? Let's see. Ah, you can. Okay. Well, regardless. There we go. This we don't want to be bold. We want it to be the regular font weight. There we go. And now we need a, I'm going to Control D this, and this is going to end up being the price. And the price, let's move this over here, and I'm going to right align this one and change it to price. How much should this large vase be? A deal. We'll price it like real, so $39.99. And the font weight, we will switch to italic. There we go. And so that's what we have now as our typography set up there. Brecken said the vase should be $1,500. Yeah, this is like a party, like wedding table vase, not a collectible ancient vase, I think. But you do you, Brecken. You know, whatever you want to price your vase at. In the previous semester, I labeled this back. I don't know. I'm conflicted about what to call that button. But large vase, text guide. We have our button here. Good. Okay, so we've laid this out. Brecken says go big or go home. Good. I think the price could also maybe be the larger size. And so here with this one under price, we'll put this one also at 46. There we go. Yeah, I like that. That's a good, maybe just a slightly smaller than the other one, 40, right? Again, communicating hierarchy, most important thing, second most important thing, third most important thing. And that does affect our alignment just slightly. And so over here in my view, I may need to go to 2D mode so I can see whether or not it's aligned. And that way, over here, I can move this if necessary so that this is lined up. Cool. Okay, so now we want this to appear when we click on this first object, right? In our objects on the shelf, we've got sphere 1, sphere 2, and shelf right now, or shelf, and then what did I call the vase? We did that glass example here. Oh yeah, here it is, vase. Great, so let's first, so we've got this laid out. That's number one job. Number one, select a font, get the different font weights, use our doubling rule, and lay them out according to our grid so that this is aligned correctly. Especially because we're going to have multiple ones, we want them to be aligned. Let's be a little more specific here with the alignment. And there we go. I feel like this could there we go. Great. So now that that's there, we're going to want this to not just appear on screen when we click on something, but actually animate on in an interesting and subtle, but a way that enriches the visual presentation, attention to detail. We want to animate all of these things, the title and the description and the price, but we want to, they'll all be essentially one thing, like the overall description. And so I'm going to select them all and say create empty parent. There we go. And we'll call this description with a capital D. There we go. We'll call this one item description, just so it's easier to see. And our anchor point there, yeah, is where we want it. Great. And so now we need to add some animation to this. And let's go ahead and start building that. So we want to have, we're going to have 3 states. We're going to have an animate on, right? So how they appear when you click on the object. We're going to have an animate off, and we're going to make that simpler. Essentially, we're just going to have them fade out. Our animate on is going to be a little bit fancier. And then we need to make a third state, a third animation clip, which is just going to be invisible. So that the default state for all of the typography is that we don't see it. And that'll just make the whole thing sort of work a little bit better. Cool. So I want to make sure that I have the parent of all 3 selected when I go to create the animation. Because if you put an animation controller on the parent, you can set keyframes on any of the children or their children's children the whole way down the hierarchy, right? When you put an animation controller at the top, the whole way down you can animate, right? When we bring in a character, you put the animation controller at the top, and that means that you can animate any part of the body all together, right? You don't need separate animation clips for the hand or foot or whatever. It can all be one thing, which is what we want. Make sure I have my animation folder selected so I don't have to move files later on, and make sure I can see my animation window, which is here. And I'll dock this down here, just like usual. So I have this selected, and now I can go ahead and create some animation. And the first one I'm going to create is description animate on. And let's save that. Great. And so now, anytime I do typography like this, right, when you're laying it out, this is where we want to get to, right? We're animating into this state. And so in those cases, almost always with typography, I animate backwards. So I'm going to set keyframes in the future at this position because I want to get here. And then I'll go back to the beginning and set keyframes about where I want stuff to come from. And so let's do that. We'll come forward a little bit here, and we're going to animate the position and the opacity for these things. And so I'm going to make sure I'm in record mode and go to title and select set a position. I'm going to say add key for the X, and for the item description also on the X, add key. And then for the price, I want the price to come up, and so that's going to be the Y And I'm going to say add key. And the other thing we want to animate for all three of these is to have them fade in, and so that's going to end up being our vertex color. And so I have all three selected, and I'll say add key. Cool, so that gives us all three things. Now, let's back up to the beginning and figure out where these need to come from. And so they all need to fade in, and so I still have them all three selected, and I will right click and add another, first make them invisible, fade them out by selecting the vertex color and going down to alpha and dialing that down to 0, and then add a key. There we go. And so now they fade in. That's a good start. And the other thing we want them to do is move slightly. And so in the title, I want that to come from this side because I don't want things to be coming from off screen like this. They would just end up being cut off because this is so short, and it's going to be kind of a subtle movement. And so here we'll move it over this way slightly. Same thing with the description. And then the price, I want it to come from, I think, below. So we'll move it down like so. And so now, there we go. Right, we're obeying our grid rule. We're moving in straight lines. I can turn off the recording feature, hit play. It's super fast right now. Let's go ahead and remember, we can always adjust the speed later on, right? In the animator, we can grab the animation clip and adjust the global speed. Really want to get the proportions right here. We can expand it a little bit by moving these out. And we can add an additional layer of interest and attention to detail here through sequencing, right? Right now, this looks okay. We need to do two things. We need to ease this a little bit more, and we need to sequence it. Let's do the easing first. Usually easing is not super necessary on opacity. It's just not that visible in a lot of cases, and certainly in this case. And so the easing is more important on our positional keyframes. And so here, I'm going to go to curves and select, that's the color. Here we go, our position. Press F so I can see everything, and we'll ease this as per usual. We want to have both of these tangents be weighted, so that way we can make this a more pronounced S of having it ease in. I'm going to do the same thing over here for the description. There we go. And here. Good, eased in. Let's go back to the dope sheet view and do some of our sequencing. And I want the title to appear first, then the description, then the price. And so fortunately we labeled things and they're labeled here. And so if I select both of these, leave those there, that's the first thing. Then we want the description. And so I'll grab all of the description keyframes, which is this set of two, and click and drag that so that the description is starting just as the title is ending. And once you slide it over to the right, there'll probably be more room to expand down here. And then we want the price to happen. And so just same thing there. So now we have 1, 2, 3. Let's see what that looks like. Good. Too quick, but we'll be able to slow it down in our view. But we have it this. Cool. That works. All right. So that's our animate on. We're going to need another one here for animate off, right? How when we click on, when we either go back to the shelf or when we click on another object, we need this description to go away so that we can see the other description. And the way that we want to add another animation state is down here, animate on, create new clip, right? So this is, when you add the first one, you just click on that button here that says like, yeah, this is going to be an object that I animate. After you have the first one, all of the subsequent animation clips are created over here by going to create new clip. And we'll call this one description animate off. Great. And so here, like we have the movement for the animate on, but for the, think about the animate off. Essentially, we just need to get this off screen elegantly. We want the attention to go to the next thing that they've clicked on, right? And so the movement helps draw your attention to the description. So we don't need to move this when it's animating off. Maybe something slight would be okay, but in this case, we'll just fade it. And so again, I could select all three of these and go to record mode and set some vertex color to fade it out. And so we'll add a key with them completely opaque, and then move forward in time and fade them out. And mission accomplished. Now, we need one more state here to make this work so that our default state is that they are not going to be seen. And so we need to create one more clip. And I'll call this description off. Not animate off. It's just off, right? So that it'll be the default state that we can just not see it. And so I'll click save. And here, all we need to do is make sure that it's invisible. And so we just need one keyframe. Essentially, there's not going to be any animation here. You're just recording a new state, and that state is essentially invisible. And so record mode, off here, right click, add key, and turn that off. Cool. So there's only one set of keyframes, just opacity at 0. And so we have those three clips: animate on, animate off, and just off. And if we look at the Animator window, animation, Animator, opens it up over here. I select the top description, and we see that all of our stuff is represented here, as per usual. Great. All right, we've created our 3 animations. And the good news is we're going to be able to just reuse them on all of the descriptions. So We don't need to do that job on every item. Once we create one here, we'll be able to copy and paste the description, and if we create it this way, then we'll be able to just change the actual type or text, and the animation will still stay there. Cool. Let's, we need to do a few things here in this window. We need to take care of the speed for the animate on and animate off, and they're both too fast. So I'm going to slow them both down here. Let's try 0.5 and 0.5 by default. The other thing we want to do is none of these animations should loop. And so we need to select the clip down here and make sure that we turn off looping and we turn off looping so that those are not going to loop. There we go. And then finally, we need to make sure that the default state is this one, the description off, so that when we load the whole application, that the typography, all of the typography is invisible and only appears when we click on something. And so again, right now this is the default state because this is what happens at the beginning of the program. It would go straight to this animation. Unfortunately, you can't just drag this line over here. It doesn't work like that. You need to click on this one, which we want to be the default, not animate off, but just off, and say set as layer default. And then it becomes the orange one, and it gets the arrow there, right? And so the default there is that this one happens. For just I want this to actually be visible so I can edit it. So I'm going to turn that on. It's not changing the animation, just changing the state that it is in the editor. Okay, let's see. We adjusted the speed. We set this as the default. We set these to not loop. That all looks good. So now, how do we interface this with our work? And if you looked at the script closely, you'll see that there's ways to connect it. And so we need to provide the parent object for the whole thing, and then we need to provide the animation clips. Unity is great in that when you create a public variable, that's what all of these objects are here that allow you to connect it to another object. It will tell you what kind of thing it needs, right? And so this is the game object, and these two are the animation clips. And let's link it up. And so this is all going to be part of Sphere 1 here. And so the game object needs to go here. And then the animation clips, I usually have my window like this so I can actually read the descriptions. And our animate on goes here, and our animate off goes here. I think that's it. Okay, let's save and test this out. Cool. Okay, so we're in the right zone here, and all of our mouse over work is still working. And so if I click on this one, and if I go back to shelf button's not working, let's go over here. That's good. That's good. I think I did something to the button. We'll look at that here in a second. If I go back here, the description comes back up. Go over here, description fades off. Cool. Let's see what's wrong with our button. We've got the button. It's running the disable all cameras here. Something weird with our button. It was working last class. Let's see what happened here. Let's set up the button one more time. UI button. There we go. I'm not going to edit it so it's completely in its default state. And let's connect it to this object and grab the appropriate function, which is on the script, disable cameras. Okay. Something went wrong with the other button. We'll just get rid of it. So this is the one here. That's our new one. This is the one that doesn't work. Get rid of that. Let's move this into position. And give it the correct and make it align with our typography. Great. Cool. Okay, so there we go. We've got one description in place. Let's look at how you can easily apply this, right? So it took a while to get this first one set up, but like I said, we're going to be able to just copy and paste and realign the description in order for it to work with the other objects. And so as far as the overall layout of things on your shelf, I think it works best when you have sort of a object on the right, description on the left, and then the next one over in the list here, because that's usually how people would click. You want to try and provide some contrast with framing the camera, so the object is on the left third and the description is over here. That way, as you click on consecutive objects, you have it going from one corner to the other over there. The other thing that I definitely want to make a change to now is the fade out seemed pretty lethargic. And so I'm going to grab that one and put that back at 1. So it gets out of the way faster. And the other thing I'm going to do is that for the animate on, like I said, I think setting this up so it's like description, 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 description. However, it's nonlinear, right? You don't know what people are going to click on. And so they may click on consecutive items that have descriptions in the same zone. And we don't want the descriptions to go over top of each other. That's not going to look great. And so we may want to come in here to our animation on the animate on and essentially just provide a little bit of a delay at the beginning, so that if it is another description coming in from the same side, that it gets off screen before we see the next one animate in. And we can do that pretty simply just by grabbing all the keyframes and shifting these this way. And let's see, does this start? Now it's going to pick up there. And so in order to put the delay, we need to at least copy these keyframes and paste them here. So Control C, Control V, there we go. And so now we get, nothing, then it starts, right? So a little bit of delay on that so that we don't have them overlapping. So just making sure the animate off is fairly quick, and then making sure the animate on has a little bit of a delay at the beginning. We'll see if that works or if we need to adjust it. Since they're all going to be duplicates of each other, adjusting the original animation clip will propagate through all of the copies. So even if you need to go back and change the font later, that would not be a matter of doing it for every one. You just did it, it would do it for the one, and then it would propagate to the other ones. Cool. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. So I'm going to label things. This is description base. And then let's say the next one is going to be our sign. Our other sphere placeholder will eventually become a sign or name, nameplate. We'll replace it with that. And so I'll just fold this up so it's easier to see that I'm doing it correctly, and just Control D to create this other one and relabel it to name. We'll call it shelf name. We'll look at some ways we could make that. And now with shelf name, remember all of our keyframes are on this level. That's intentional because now we can move this object and all of this animation information is relative to the parent. This is key to understand. It'll be super important for all of the Unity projects going forward, is that you want to animate something, but you don't want the animation to only ever happen at that point in world space. You want it to be able to be easily moved around, right? If you make a bouncing mushroom in your game, you want to be able to easily copy and paste it so that you have a lot of bouncing mushrooms. If you animate the position on the very top level, then you're essentially saying that that only animates there because it's animating relative to the parent, and the parent's on the top part of the hierarchy. So here, if I come back to our scene and our view, and I grab our shelf, now I can grab this and move this over to our other corner over here, like so. And make our appropriate changes. And so now everything gets duplicated. All of the animation is in place. Everything else we need, I can just come in and select each object and change what I need, right? And so this will be decorative name plate. We need a little bit more room for this one, so just go ahead and expand it, right? So it's like that. And then over here. Customize your decor with this hip nameplate. How much? There we go. Great. And so now, like I said, sphere 2 is going to be our placeholder for this. Let's look here. We supply the new game object. We supply the same animation clips, on to on, off to off, and save, and test. Great. The framing of this one might change a little bit. How would I do that? I would go to the appropriate camera. And so here, get out of 2D mode. Select the object, make sure my mouse is in this window and press F. We'll zoom in there. And so here is where I could change. Now I select the camera, and I want it to be more obvious that it's this object. I thought the vase was too much in the foreground for this object's camera, and so I'm going to do something more like this, so that, like, hey, this is the thing we're talking about here. And the shortcut, remember, if you haven't written it down, write it down, Control-Shift-F. And so if you have the camera selected and you press Control-Shift-F, it'll snap the camera to this view that you currently have here. It's a good one, Control-Shift-F. And you'll see the camera transform, change over there. And so now, when we select that second object, it should have a better angle on it. Nice. Yes, way better, right? And yeah, making the camera views, pushing some of them in a little bit, moving some of them out a little bit. You know that this one I angled a little more severely over to the side. It just makes the animation between the objects a little bit more interesting as far as the camera goes here. let's see if we can, I talked about the glass last time, and one other thing we could do here, the substances, like I said, if we go to our substance folder here, you have the substance, and then you have the SBSAR file. But the other thing you also have in here, for instance, which one is this? This is the marble. Is that you do have access to the individual textures. And so, for instance, with the glass itself, something we could do here perhaps, if we select this and look at the glass shader or material, I did put that normal map on it. It's pretty low. Usually if you mouse over right here, it lets you scrub this number. I don't know why that's not on. You're gonna have to type it in. You can see if I turn it up like 0.9, I sort of come in here and look at it. The normal map, remember, is like a bump map. It's pushing the surface in and out. When you combine that with the glow, it can look kind of glittery, right? The bloom. And so you have to be a little judicious there. Usually just a little bit goes a long way, right? Just seeing the highlight kind of broken up by the surface detail helps a bit. But for instance, what if I took this marble pattern here and used it as my base map? There we go. You see, that gives me a little bit more surface detail on the glass itself. The see-throughness is still a function of the alpha on the color channel. And so, totally invisible, totally solid, right about there, right? But it just gives me a little bit more detail on what's going on there. Transparent, is there anything else we can do here? Blending mode alpha, render front. I don't think there's anything else we can do in terms of that. Enable to be interesting. It's fine. But another thing you can do with our substances, and you've got access to that really great substance community library. And I have another folder of substances, I think, on the Google Drive. I'll have to see if I can find that and put it on the assignment. But there we go, right? And so now it does take some attention to detail to get the first description set up. But the subsequent descriptions should not be tough, right? Let's enable some good practices here. Is that Unity is not going to spell check that description. And so I would say the safest way to not end up with something that needs to be corrected would be, probably write the descriptions in a Google Doc. Let's double check our descriptions. Looks fine. Same thing here. Right? That way you'll easily catch spell check problems here, and then you can just copy and paste it here. Unity not designed for writing copy. Great. And so what you need to have for Monday is all of your items arranged on your shelf with your descriptions. And we're making a video of them, right? And so in order to make the video, you also need to import what package? How have we made videos out of our Unity? Yeah, Unity Recorder, right. Recorder is already installed in this one. And so if I go to Unity Recorder, Recorder window, if you have this selected set to 1920 by 1080, and you have this set to game view, then you will get 1920 by 1080. I would be extra sure by selecting, yeah, this here to make sure you're going to get 1920 by 1080 recorded video coming out of there. And 24 frames per second is plenty in this case. Let's make a name. Okay, so making text is fairly simple. You know, the text object gives us this, which we can edit as we see fit. However, let's make something a little bit more interesting here. And instead of using text, I'm going to use text spline. That'll allow us a little bit more control. And so I'll go to text spline and then pick a pretty thick, chunky, let's say Roboto slab black. There we go. Like that. And let's combine some of the things that we did before, right? So in order to just get the shape, it would be extruding it. There we go. And you know, this is going to be like a physical thing that we sit on a shelf. And so maybe not quite that thick, but still thick under the offset, kind of like that. And then the other thing that the other trick we used before is using this spline also for a sweep to sort of outline the type. And so I am going to create a sweep, and you could copy and paste this, or you could make a smart copy by having it selected and say create instance. There we go. And so that goes in there. And then I'm going to use a rectangle sweep. Before I put it in there, I'm just going to make the rectangle much smaller, 5 by 5, so that's clear what's happening. There we go. And so now you see we've got an outline, but it's not quite thick enough. That's going to be a function of the rectangle. And which direction? Nope, not that direction. This direction gives us this outline. And sort of moving it like that, and then grabbing the sweep object and adjusting it. Let's get the rectangle wider like that. And then grab the sweep, move it forward a little bit. Cool. And the other idea I had thinking about this was, yeah, there's still, you know, it looks like a physical object a little bit more now, but usually something like this would be like a solid piece. And so let's see if there's a way that we could do that. Let's see if this works. I got an idea about how to do that. I'm going to turn the sweep off for a second and just look at the text spline here. And the text spline, I want to be able to actually edit this. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit C. And so that gives me the spline, but now it's editable. This is like, what's the command in Illustrator? Create outlines, right? Where then you can actually edit the typography, right? Or the actual shape of the typography, which, I mean, usually is not something you want to do, but now I have access to, if I go to point mode, the individual points, right? So you could come in here and E, and you could move a point to change the shape of the actual thing. I want to actually have each letter individual. And so there's a command for that. If you right click on the spline, you can say, it's not showing up in the right click menu. I'm going to select it and press Shift C. Yeah. Explode. This one right here. Explode segments. Shift C. Explode. There it is. Segments. And now it's broken it out into individual letters. There, the A is actually together. We may have to fix that. So yeah, depending how long the name is, this might be more or less, but I don't think this top one has anything in it, just the ones underneath. Let's double check that. If I get rid of this one, yeah. I'm gonna take these out of the extrude like that, so we can just deal with them individually. And I'm gonna label them, because that's necessary. Call this C. These two are both A, so I need to combine those. Right click and connect objects and delete so that the A is just one shape. And we'll call this A. S. E. And Y. There we go. Then I'm going to try another object, which is really great here under Object Menu. Spline Mask. Essentially allows me to combine things. And so coming in here with Spline Mask, and if I put the C and the A in there, now if I take the A and I move it in object mode over here, you see you can actually combine. It's now one. And so we can make this look as if it's one continuous piece. We may need multiple spline masks to do that, because the spline mask is only two objects. And so we'll make another one, and we want to combine this spline mask with the S. And so I'll grab the S and move this over like that, and then make another one and combine the whole thing with the E. Move the E over, kind of like that, and then combine the whole thing again with the Y. And so here, move the Y over. Maybe there's a limit on this. I'm not sure I've ever pushed it this far before. It doesn't look like it's doing the Y for some reason. Why not? The alignment here is key. Under the spline mask, under the XY plane, which is the plane that we're working on. So if it's not working, switching the plane is a big part of it. Let's see. I'm going to use this top spline mask here and hit C to convert it into one spline and see if that will combine with the Y. No, it just doesn't like this Y letter. Make sure it's not displaced. It's at 0. This is set to let's look at this Y spline, something weird about it. I'm going to go to point mode and look at this. The only thing that comes to mind here is, remember, white and blue does show you the direction of the spline. So this is the starting point down here. I'm going to change the starting point to something over here. And so you can right click and say set first point, set point order, set first point. Let's see if that fixes anything. Go back to object mode, move this way. What if I nudge some of the other letters? Well, we'll try it like that. Obviously, you'll have different letters. It'll play out differently. But all of this is one spline. We should, let's see what happens, cross your fingers, be able to drop it back in the extrude. And ta-da. All right, well, yeah. Okay, so maybe there's weird geometry there. A little bit, not that important. And then instance this here. And so we will instance this and put this down here. Like so. And turn this back on. There we go. And let's move the sweep. There we go. We do get that line there, but we'll take it. But now it looks like it's all one, you know, as if it were carved from a continuous block. Cool. Let's bring this over. But I definitely want this to be able to be textured in 2 separate ways. And I also, for everything on the shelf, we want to have the rounded corners, right? Rounded corners. For vases, and things like that you're doing with the lathe, you're kind of going to get that, no problem. But for here, remember the bevel deformer is going to be our friend. And let's go ahead and get that involved. As best we can. A smaller, tighter bevel is going to be less problematic here for everything. You can see that as I move the letters around, it sort of changes the geometry. Try and clean things up. And so the sweep, I'm going to right-click and connect objects. This will be the outline. And then the extrude, I'll right-click and connect objects. This will be the inner structure. And I'll take these. I don't want to get rid of these here, because that's the procedural version. And so what I usually do is make a null and turn it off, red. I call this a hider, so that I can get back to it if I need it, but I don't want to see this stuff right now. And so I dump it in there. And I save the project. And now with this, we want the bevel to actually work, so we need to group these things together. Bevel is way too thick by default, and so our bevel size here, probably something like 0.2. There we go, that's much sharper. You see it's done some weird things to the shading. We can correct some of that with Phong break rounding. It's a good box to know to check, and that'll clean some of that up. We can make our rounding a little bit bigger, maybe 0.3, and add maybe 2 subdivisions there so that it's a little cleaner. Maybe a little bit bigger. What does 0.5 look like? I think that's pretty good. That's better. Let's bring this object over. We'll go ahead and add our automatic UV unwrap like we did for our playground objects, so that happens on export. And this is the name. And so there'll be 2 separate meshes in Unity, allow us to texture them separately. And we'll go File, Export. What kind of file do we need? That's right. And no cameras, no lights. Okay. And this is name 1 piece. And we are not putting it in 185, we are putting it in 200. And let's bring that back over here and replace this object. So I'll go back to shelf and import our file. And I want it to replace this object here. And so an easy way to do that would be to drag it in here and then make it a child of that sphere, and then reset the transform. So that snaps it to right where that is. So at least it gets you in the ballpark. It's way too big, so we got to come in here and turn down our scale factor to maybe 0.1, maybe, yeah, 0.1. Let's see what that looks like and apply it. It's a little bit small. Let's say 0.3. We're getting some inverted normals there. And so we can, I mean, a lot of that has to do with my name, and I think that problem was just particular to this sequence of letters. We'll see. And here, we can move this to where we need to. Maybe rotate it a little bit. And then take it out of the hierarchy. So you could just turn off the sphere and keep the name there. Let's see if there's another wood that we could bring in, maybe a lighter wood that would go on this. And we'll go back to our, I wonder if I need to sign into that again. If you just Google community substance, it should come up, and then you should probably bookmark it. We need more than that. Community substance Adobe is going to get us there. Substance community assets, substance3d.adobe.com. And over here we can, am I still logged in? I am, sweet. Wood, let's see the woods. I like this. Maybe here. And in our substance folder, we'll import that. And we should be able to drag this directly to here. We may need to unfold. Yeah, we need these two. There we go. We have the wood on there. The grain seems kind of big to me. And so, two different ways to address that. Let's try just on the structure, material, are not details above that, just tiling. If we put it at 3, there we go. That gives it a little bit more of that. And let's put it in the inner part as well. These two seem really high contrast. And so to adjust the, more detailed material things, under graph, this is gonna, your mileage may vary. Some of these substances will have more controls and other ones will have less. This one doesn't have a whole bunch. Intensity, local and global, random seed, overall lightness. Let's try and lighten it up a little bit. And you could sort of rotate the orientation of the wood. And there's a tiling control here. Or if we want something different in the middle, you don't always have to use the substances. In some, regular cases, you could just use a regular material. Create material. Call this purple. And just make it look kind of plasticky. With, metal down, shininess up. And we'll put this on the inner structure. There we go. Now, the level of surface detail is kind of pronounced when we look at substances versus just a material out of the box in Unity. And so here's one thing where we could get some more surface detail with some of the substance maps. So just getting a little bit of surface detail here on this. If we went to, again, maybe not the ceramic, because that's kind of but maybe the marble has a little bit of detail, and so this is something that might be able to apply to the normal channel. And so I'll grab the normal map. Remember, normal maps are always blue like this, and apply that there. And now, we get a little bit of something, well, a lot there, way too much. So I'm going to turn up the tiling, maybe 3, 3, and then the normal map strength turn down, maybe 0.2. But now, as the light passes over it, it's something that looks like it has like a level of detail that is relevant, and it's not too perfect, right? That's the thing with a lot of computer graphics. What we get out of the box, in a lot of instances, looks too perfect if we're trying to look, photorealistic like this. Cool. Okay. So a lot of great modeling practice, and then a lot of good Unity 3D skills in this project. Let's go ahead and save this, and let's look at questions from this week. In 200, or no, it's here. And I'm going to preemptively launch it didn't let me add the project, so I need to go down one more level. There we go. And let's open that. And let's look at the questions. Here, view details, there we go. Cool, Christina.
Hello. So I only have like a quick question. I was making edits after submitting my assignment, just because I wanted to see what I can touch up on the assignment, even though it's not needed. But anyways, I came across, I wanted to change my audio for my bricks when it has the hit effect, but anyways, I'm sorry. So I noticed that after changing the audio source on my original brick one, it doesn't have the sound, and I tried increasing the volume on it and everything, and I don't know what I did, but I don't know if there's a way to fix it. But if you see here, if I hit the brick, here, that was the leaf one, right? But if I hit the brick, if I can hit the brick, oh my gosh, you honestly cannot hear anything. There you go. It's just the original effect of the ball. It's just the little, But with my leaf one, it's totally fine. So at first I thought maybe I did something wrong, but I went back on the videos, double checked everything, and I checked my leaf one too, just to see maybe I messed up on something, but it's all the same. So I went back to my original audio on that, but I was just wondering maybe is there a way to fix it?
Okay, so when you're talking here, just showing more and more of your stuff, because I could sort of just barely see what's happening there. But that's the leaf that you have selected right now, and that one's working. Let's see, did you select the other one? No. Let's see here. Let's make sure it does allow you to change it. Should be no problem. So if the ball's there and it hits this brick at the start here, and this brick were to have some other sound, again, let's make this easier to test. So it goes straight up, make this 0. Yeah, okay, so we got it that time. So it's functional. Let's see what the keys might be here. So, I mean, the first key is while you're talking, right? That's why I show everybody OBS, so that, not that we can see everybody in OBS, it's so you can show your screen. Because it's like solving a detective crime here, right? When we're trying to do school remotely like this. And I need to be able to see as much as I can of what's going on here. I mean, assuming you have put the impact sound in here, and that the volume here is not too low. The other things here, I mean, make sure the priority has not been ground super low. These actually shouldn't be play on awake here. Let's double check this. It's going to take a while to open. And making sure that you didn't edit the clip, if you did edit it, in a way that's going to be, does any audio show up here when you select the audio clip? That's going to be another thing. Because if not, then perhaps the clip itself is not going to work, and you may have a clip that's in the wrong file format. So making sure it's a WAV is going to be the most usable. It will work with an MP3. In general, having a whole bunch of MP3s is not a great idea, but switching it to WAV in Audition, like we covered, would be the best move there. Noelle.
With the animator, I'm just wondering what, because I know sometimes this will be like over here, and this will be like sometimes down here. I'm just wondering what the difference is and what it changes with the animation on Unity.
Okay, good question. The position in the window doesn't do anything. What matters is the connections, right? So the fact that this is connected and it's orange means that this is going to, be loaded by default here. But where it goes in the window is not important. When you start to have many, many more of these, laying them out in a visual order that makes sense just makes it easier for you to understand. But moving the position of it in the window doesn't change any of the functionality. It has to do with, what is connected to what, and these settings over here are the things that matter. Good question. Michelle.
Hello, this is Michelle Jackson. My question has to do with the background audio for the games we're making. I wanted to know, is it better to edit like the levels in a separate audio software before you import them into Unity, or is there sort of an easier way to balance all of the clips that are playing? I found it difficult to raise the volume of like the bounce noises while in relation to the background noise. I can only lower the background noise, but I couldn't bring the bounce noises forward. So I wasn't sure if there's a better way to do that.
Yeah, it's gonna depend on your individual audio, right? So if your bounce noises are not normalized, then yeah, you're not gonna want to push them above that. So I'm assuming you were able to let's see, did I put a music object in here? May not have saved it. Our volume here, right, backing off certainly the music so that the sound comes in. This is our, first level of changing things. There's a whole other mixing component in Unity I'm not going to get into right now, but yeah, backing this off so that you can hear the other sounds. If the other sounds, something you could do to adjust your other sounds is that perhaps they are just not properly, the volume on them is not properly set. And so let me show you how to adjust that in a way that at least the sound itself is, its volume is, let's say, maximized. The word we're going to use here is normalized, which means that it'll make the loudest part of the sound maximally loud. Okay, and so if I grab some sound file here of some kind, sure, we'll use this. This is just some audio I recorded for a 184 project. But here you can see we have these individual pieces of audio, and if I wanted to maximize, let's say this is one of your sound effects, and we'll process it as so. So I'll go ahead and say clip crop. Here we go. And so it's just this now. So this, the Y on this graph is loudness. How do I make it maximally loud? You can select the whole thing and then go up to effects, favorites, and then it should be in here, normalize to -0.1 dB. And so watch what happens to the waveform when I run this. Boom. Now it's taken the loudest part of the waveform, right, which was this, like this was the biggest wave in the waveform, and it's pushed it to just below the maximum loudness there. All right, and that's sort of as loud as this one could go without it getting distorted. And so now I would save this as a wave and bring it back in. And so make sure your sound effects are normalized, so you're going to need to edit them in order to then your changes that you can make here should be better. Can you push this above 1 here? Let's see. No, it won't let you do that. That's probably for the best. So yeah, bring the volume of the music down and the effects up in order to do that. If you have to bring the music way down, do not be afraid of moving this slider a bunch. This number there's a whole discussion here. The way we hear things in terms of volume, it's not a linear scale, okay? But this is a linear number here. And so it may look like you're turning it way, way down, but just trust your ears, right? as long as you can turn it down and it still works. Don't be afraid that this is a small number, because there's many things to discuss there. The volume is perceived exponentially, and the measurements of it are calibrated differently. There's just a bunch of stuff there. So try that. Tyler.
Issue that I think I might have in Unity, like I have the ball hitting a brick and it makes a sound that it's bouncing off of it or it breaks it. I hit the ball against the brick, it does the audio sound that I put into it. Hear that ball. It's pretty good. So when I put it on the pitch, when I go to itch and I run the game, you can't hear that. It's very faint. When I itch, very faint. All the other audio files they all sound the same. They that little tick sound and I love it. Can't barely hear it, but it's there. It's not the same sound.
Interesting. I would showing me the audio clips here would help. That's a weird one. I mean, that is coming through. I would check and make sure what I just talked to Michelle about, that those are that your the sound for the brick explosion is normalized first, and then second, make sure it is a wave. I'm not sure what you grabbed there. If it came from our sound effects library, then yeah, those are all waves, I believe. That it's not an MP3, because that would mean it has to do less decompressing. And so I would try those two things first. Yeah, those are just overrides. I don't know. I'll Google something about that, but I would first make sure that, number one, all the sound files are normalized, and then also make sure they are all WAV files. And you can convert the MP3s in Audition using the technique we used before. And then re-upload and see if that addresses the issue. And if not, let's drill down on that. Because, yeah, something about the WebGL version of it. But let's see. Lola?
Hello, I hope everyone's having a good week so far.
So far.
I just have one quick question about the tray line. I was wondering if there was any possible way that we could apply particles to it. I just think it would be a pretty cool effect overall. I don't know if this is like done simply or not, but I was just wondering if it was able to be done. But that's all for me this week.
Yeah, we totally did that. Let's see if we can find the timestamp for it. Right, and so instead of using a trail, you'll use a particle emitter, but that would have been what, last Monday's class, and so that was, yeah, Monday, and so this was Wednesday, and then Monday was the big particle day. And so, yeah, you're making a trail with particles. So let's see, where did I do that? Yeah, right here. So I'll timestamp this, right? So if you want to share something with the timestamp, you click on share, start at, and then you can copy this, and I'll post it on Slack for you. There you go. So the key is that you got to set it to world space and make it a child of the ball. Gia.
I have a question, and everyone spoke to Gia, so I have the questions on the sound effects. So I already turned on your rules of the sound effects, like when I break the bricks and it's gotta have a sound on it. So when I play it on my computer, on Unity, the sound is pretty clear, you can hear that. But it's weird, like when I try to upload it on the games, the sound is not clear, like it has to be, like the sound of the background is just like really loud, even when I turn it down. Even when I turn it down, so I don't know how to fix it. If you know, can you show me some of that?
Okay, so you're clearly getting the same thing Tyler's getting there. I'll have to drill down on that this weekend. I don't know, there must be something about the WebGL audio settings with having this many layers on it. Or something's changed. I don't know, we haven't run into that in previous semesters. But I'll drill down on that this weekend, see what I can find.
My question this week is pertaining to the computer. The idea for the illumination is kind of scales back and forth. His obstacle is to destroy the wall ultimately once it gets up there. But so we don't have any rotation settings on his animation, but when we go to play the game, he starts spinning out of control, and I'm not really sure why. I was able to fix this issue on the rigid body. I just freeze the rotation. But I'm just curious why that might be happening.
Yeah, it's happening because the collider is colliding, right? Because you have this destroy object. Yeah, it's colliding with the colliders on the other objects, which we have set to colliders, not triggers. And if this were, I'm unclear whether like you're hitting this guy or just deletes the ball. But yeah, it's because it's hitting the other colliders there that are in place. So when we animated the other things, they weren't running into other objects, and this one's slightly running into some other stuff. So you'd either need to create some more space between them or just do what you did, which is fine, so that it doesn't rotate. So that's a good solution. Good job, Tessa. Lazaro.
Hello everyone, hope everyone's doing well.
We're good.
I had a question about the blend mode for the particles. So when I originally did it, when I originally had my background, it would do this. So I have it to as alpha where it looks normal, and then I put the additive one, and when I did it, it would just turn completely like light. At least until like I moved it to the side, it was normal over here, and then it went back to just light whenever it went to that light blue. I don't know if there's a way to fix that.
Yeah, so additive, it's adding with the background, right? And so this bright background is also blowing out the particle color here. So I think changing the background to a darker color would be the way to go there, so that this, and then I forget, I mean, you can get rid of this image now, right? Because the particles are going to take over as far as that goes.
Put the blend mode back to, or to a different blend mode, back to alpha or something like that. And the second question I had is, I don't know if anyone ran into this problem, but sometimes when I would play the game, the ball would get stuck on either like any of the bricks that I have. So for example, it would get stuck on window one game, it would be good for 10 games, then it would get stuck in between the little area right here with the axe. So I don't know if it's the rigid body, the collider.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is just the placement of things. You want to try to not have it with these tiny cavities where the ball size could get stuck. The other one is making sure that everything that the ball hits has the physics material on it. That can stop things. So every object, for instance, like our crabs here, where's the crab? Yeah, and so the crab at the very top level, right, would be a combined thing. It would need to have a, you know, let's just give it a box collider, I guess, for now. Or no, it already had a collider. I don't need that. That you would want the material to be the bounce. Okay, so that's going to make sure that it ricochets off of there. So you can actually replace them all at the same time. If you select all of the objects, then you can just drag all bounce in there. And then also making sure that there aren't quite so many small places. So just decreasing the size of the ball slightly will solve some of those problems, and making sure that all bounce is on everything. Brecken.
Hey guys, here's my video for the week. So I'm wondering how I can up the intensity of the bloom on a single object over upping it on every object. While I like the bloom how it's sitting right now for everything, it kind of adds a cool element to the game. Let's say the ball, for example. I'd like to see that have a little bit more glow. So how could I do that?
Yeah, so it's in the emission settings for that material. So for instance, if I just make something, there we go, let's make it smaller. Okay, and under my materials here, right, this has the glow on it. And this material, the emission here, intensity, is what's going to engage the glow more or less, right? And so the glowing, if I wanted a glowier object, I would need to create another new material, and call this big glow or whatever. And let's duplicate this and move it over. There we go. And so on big glow, I would go into emission, turn it on, give some color, and then the emission map here, the intensity. If I turn that way up and put this on, that object there. Let's make it white so it's comparing apples to apples. Yeah, so you can see that this object glows way more than this one because its intensity is greater. Good question. Brecken, you're online there. Does that make sense for what we're doing? Also, like I said, you saw me change it to white. White's going to give you the biggest glow there. So if you're glowing a color, we're going to perceive some colors as being brighter. And so adjusting the emission and the color may be necessary there. And so usually you don't need to tinting the glow the whole way over here. The emission always looks really lame. And so just giving it a little bit gives you more of that like flavored glow. Cool. There we go. In yours there, Brecken, it looked like the particles you have on the side that are sort of that space haze, they don't look like they're in additive blend mode. They look like they still might be in alpha, and I think you probably definitely want those to be in additive. They kind of look just soupy as opposed to sort of like a form of energy. These over here, I could be wrong, but yeah, see how whenever you see this darkening towards the edge of the pixels with the default pixel, with the default sprite, particle sprite, then yeah, having it be in additive blend mode. Something over here, like maybe having these bigger ones that sort of form this haze, and then make a second emitter with some tiny ones that kind of give you some sparkle inside the haze, I think would be cool. Are these spheres or images? If they're spheres, having them rotate would be cool. Great. Is it an image that you made in Cinema 4D? But did you render it from Cinema 4D? Okay, in that case, you will get a lot more bang for your buck exporting each planet as I mean, they're just planets, so you can actually just make a sphere. And then bringing in your noise from Cinema 4D over here to create your planets. That way, in Unity, you can have the planets slowly rotating or orbiting in the background. It's going to make it a way more dynamic sort of background. If you look at Lamb's game, he has a little bit of that going on. I think you could make that a lot more interesting. You could make one of them a moon that orbits around something else in the background. All of that would be way really up the visual fidelity of what you're trying to do. Yeah, and so a lot of what you're learning in 185, right, you can apply that here, and by building the scene here, it's not that complicated, it's just some spheres in Unity, then you can make it a dynamic thing rather than just a static image in the background. So in Cinema 4D, like you created some noise, I would assume, on the material, and so you'd want to export that. What's going to be the easiest way to export the material? Let's see. If we come in here and create something new of some kind in the color noise, and let's give it something slightly more interesting. Yeah, maybe something like that. It's going to be the quickest way to do that. If we put this on here. Let's see what happens if this brings it over. File, export, FBX. Okay. This is going to be a planet. Maybe it'll bake it out automatically. Let's find out. So now if we come back over here, not there, over here, sure. And now we want to import that FBX. So, because the geometry is not really an issue here, we're dealing with a planet, right? We just kind of want the noise. Now, there's a question of whether or not this noise... Yeah, that looks pretty good. What we need to do is select this and object bake material, right? Because the noise is a shader, right? And we want to turn that into just an image. And so we're going to bake the material. It will ask you for a format, and we want PNGs. We want it to be much bigger than 256. Let's say 2048 by 2048. And that looks fine. And then we go to options, and which channels do we want to output? A color. And so I'll bake that. And you see it writes my noise to an image file. Could not save. Why could it not save? Well, here it shows that in this. We could save it here. File, save image as, PNG, and okay. We'll put it over here. And this is our planet noise. And then over here, I'll make a new material. Planet surface. And bring in the image I just saved. Planet noise. This can go on here. And this can go on here. There we go. Now we've got that as a planet. So now it's a thing that we can put in the background and have it dynamically moving. If we look at space stuff, there's always a halo around the planet. And we could create that now that we have this. I'm going to make a new shader graph. Shader graph URP lit. Call this planet shader. I'm going to make a new material. Planet shader graph. And we want to select the appropriate shader graph. Planet shader. There we go. Double click on shader graph. And since you've got some experience here, Brecken, this should look a little familiar now. So we can bring in our surface texture here and send it to our base color. And we'll see that that'll appear down here. But the other thing we want to do is get that atmospheric haze that happens when we see planets from space. For instance, Earth from space. Yeah. So this, right? We see the atmosphere, we get this bright brightness towards the edge. Is that Mark Kelly or is that Mark Kelly's brother? I don't know, one or the other. And that brightness around the edge is Fresnel. And so here, if we spacebar and look for Fresnel effect, we can use this in the emission to create the brightness around the edge. And so I'm going to take this and dump it into emission. And see what we get here by default. I don't know, it's taking a long time to update. The most important thing here is this power, which allows you to sort of control the thickness of our atmosphere. Let's move it out to the edge, kind of like that. And save this asset. Come back to our scene and apply our planet surface shader graph. It didn't update the thing here. Put that on here. There we go. Now we get what we're looking for there. And you see that the lightness always stays on the edge, even if we are revolving or rotating our planet. Another cool source for planetary imagery is NASA. NASA textures. You can use them, they're free. Your tax dollars are paying for them. So image and textures. You know, you could use these as a starting point and then sort of go from there. Let's get the file and unzip this. Let's bring this in and go back to our shader graph. And this could come in. Dump this in here. There we go. And give us more of that moon-ish kind of look. We want to change the color of the Fresnel. We could grab a color and choose a color and then blend. There's a blend node, and then we'll take this as the base, this as the color, and put it into, yeah, overlay. The overlay, I like, that gives us like a little bit of white, but then the other one, another option here would be multiply. It doesn't give you quite as much of the light, but I kind of like overlay here in this instance. And then run the output of the blend. Hey, Nick. Sure. To there. And then by changing this, it allows you to adjust that. So this is no longer in play. We're using this, and you got to save the asset. And go back here. Let's look at it. Cool. This image, a little low res. I don't know, maybe this is a small moon. Let's see if there's a better one. What is this, Ganymede? One of the Jupiter moons? Ooh, Io. Why is half of it so blurry? This is much better. Phobos. Why is it half of it so blurry? Why can't they take clearer pictures of a moon thousands of miles away from here? Casey said, not fully understanding the complexities of space travel. So it'd be great if this was more editable. Let's do it. Planet shader. You can make your own inputs for this. So you may want to go back and adjust this later, or make multiple materials with the same shader graph. And so I want an input here for color. And we'll say that this will be the Fresnel color. And then you can drag that in and attach it to here and say our default Fresnel color should be, you know, something like this. Let's get rid of the color. And that'll give us an input that we can adjust in the interface without having to come back in here all the time. We also may want to adjust the Fresnel power. And so we can hit plus, and that is just one number. That's just a float, and that's Fresnel power. And our default maybe should be whatever it is now, 5, and drag that in and hook that up to here. There we go. And then it'd be great if we could just drag in an image in the interface. And so here we want a texture 2D, and this will be planet texture. And this information should be loaded in here, and we'll save. And now in the editor, I will have these controls. So here, under this planet, I can change the color of the Fresnel. I could change the power of the Fresnel, and I could just freely provide another texture. Not that one. Where's the better one? I just got a Phobos. Here we go. Ah. Cool. Let's do a little bit more. In this, we could also take the texture here and use it to create some surface detail. And so, for instance, the normal. Oh, here, normal, yeah. We can create, from black and white, we can create a normal map with a node. Height, normal from height. I'll put the input from here and attach this to there. This is getting a little messy. So this is similar, to our nodal interface from Cinema 4D. And let's save it and come back here. And now we should see there's some more detail here. It may be more obvious if we were able to adjust the shininess of it. So this gets kind of pedantic, but we can do it. The smoothness and the metallic, we want to be able to adjust those things. And so I'll make another float here for metallic. And the default for that should be, the 0, I guess. And I'll make another one for smoothness. And the default for that maybe should be 0.9. And drag those in here so that we have controls for them. And smoothness goes in here. Metallic goes in here. Save this shader graph again. Now I have controls here to control the smoothness of this. And so now you see how adjusting the smoothness, you can see that the normal map is now affecting the surface of the object. This is no longer, let's make it circular, 1, 1, 1, there we go. And since the normal map is being generated from the actual color, if we sub this out, there we go. It generates it from there. So the smoothness may be a little obnoxious. Dial that out a little bit, but now you see what's going on. You could take your color, there we go, match it to this Fresnel power. The other thing we want to do here is maybe make the Fresnel glow brighter. Let's add one more thing to it. I'm going to save this for future reference. I think this is a special node. What is it? We have this output overlay. Is it in the color? I can't quite remember. Fresnel color. Yeah, let's look at this. I'm going to save this. If I go in here, Fresnel color. No, it does not give me HDR there. The emission, graph settings. Let's look at this. That's all fine and dandy. there's a node for this. I can't quite remember. Let's look it up. Ah, this is it. So in the color, we change it from default to HDR, and then we save the asset. And now, I believe, when we come back here in the scene and look at our color, now we have, just like we do in all the other ones, we should be able to dial up the intensity of our Fresnel glow to make a proper planet. Cool. I'm going to save this planet shader for sure. Yeah, so in the color, you have to say it's an HDR color, not just a default color. Cool. Our Brecken, I'll put this planet shader on our list of shaders for the future because that's pretty good. And now you can make a much better background there by applying some of that, right? So a lot of what you're learning about the node space and Redshift in Cinema 4D, very similar to over here. You know, we sort of cheated in that there's not a separate normal channel. We're just using this normal from height. This would be one more thing that we want to adjust, perhaps, the strength of this. And so I'll put one more float in here. We'll say normal strength and set the default to, you know, I don't know, 0.2. And then drag this in here and attach this to here and save the asset. And then come back in here. And now I have this. And so you can see the normal strength here. So this is an interesting one where you can see like the usable part of the range here is very small. It's hard for me to even move my hand just a little bit to sort of get this usable range. And so we can adjust that in here. Normal strength, we don't want it to be a default, we want it to be a slider, and we want the min to be -0.1, and we want the max to be 0.1, and then we want the default to be 0.01. And so now Let's save it. And now we'll have a much more functional slider in that it allows us to explore the usable range of this much more easily. You know, because once you dial up the normal strength too high, it just ends up looking strange. You know, maybe just a little bit like that, so that you can see what's going on. But again, it's being derived from the brightness of the texture. And so here, you can see that I would need to move that further, although this image is also pretty small. Didn't it say it was bigger on the website? I thought there were some higher res versions of this stuff on NASA.
I don't know about on NASA. I know on Solar System Scopes there is.
Solar system what?
Solar System Scope? That one has textures for planets as well. I don't know. I think they do have a moon map if I remember correctly. I believe the textures link is.
Nice. Let's bring that in. Cool. All right, let's save that. And cool, we are done here. Let me post this so it's on the project. See ya.